In the previous video, we joined the legs and cross piece together, and we've got some decisions to make now again as we get ready to fasten the top, but something interesting has happened here. Usually, if something isn't quite right, it gets worse as you go along in the project, unless you take action to correct it. But here, we've got something that's automatically gotten better. If you remember, when everything was just sitting here, there was quite a bit of rocking of the top, and I was going to show you how we fix that. But since everything's buttoned up, there's no more rocking. Isn't that great? We still will have some other errors to steer back onto the road and to correct. But for now, let's just get busy. The challenge ahead of us is pretty much similar to what we did before. So we need to locate where the screws are going to go, measure distances so they look nice. We need to drill the hole for the screw to pass through the top, and then we need to drill smaller holes so that the screw will grab in the legs. So, first decision. If you look here at the plans, you see we've got 3 screws on each end. That's a fair amount over a 9-inch width. So 3 screws would look like this. I don't think it's too much. I mean, visually speaking, it's certainly going to be strong enough. But you know, 2 screws would be strong enough too. The reason I'm not going to go with 2, though, is because of a little issue here. We've seen it before, but can you take a look there? The cup of this board has caused a gap here. I think we can get rid of most, if not all of that, but it's going to take a screw in the middle in order to do it. You might think, well, is that 1 screw in the middle enough? You know, if we just did the 1 screw in the middle, and I'd say no. It would probably hold together okay, but it's going to kind of look funny to have just the 1 screw there. It's not going to be as strong as it should be. So we'll go with 3, and now we have to draw some lines. Basically, we want the top to be centered on the legs and these front edges flush. That's what we're shooting for. So how do we do that? Well, step 1 is to determine how much total overhang of the top there is in relation to the legs. What do we have here? We're showing 1 inch and a half, and then 1/8. So the difference between this biggish line and this not so biggish line here is 1/8. So that's 1 5/8. I can work metric or imperial. I like imperial because it's got a little more personality to it, and it's also very easy to split imperial measurements in half. So let's just take the 1 inch. 1 inch split in half is 1/2 inch. 5/8 of an inch, that's sort of the rest of the measurement. You split a fraction in half by doubling the denominator, by doubling the number at the bottom. So 5/8 turns into 5/16. So we've got 1/2 plus 5/16, and that should be our amount of overhang on each side. So that's the 1/2 there. Where are we? Right here. That's the 1/2. So I'm going to put it there, and then I'm going to move it over 5/16 from there. So that's 1/16 there, 2/16, 3/16, 4/16, 5/16. So right there is where I think it should go. That's how we split the difference. Now, I'm not going to trust myself, if you remember, multiple layers of safety. So, oops, slide this over here. Now we go over to the other side, and we check the same thing, and we find it's very, very close. Very close indeed. So actually, depends on where we are along there, but there. I think that's pretty much perfect. Yep, it is. Functionally perfect. Not absolutely perfect, but functionally perfect. And now I'm going to just make sure that these edges are flush here. So the legs and the crosspiece are exactly where we want them on the top. And I'm just going to trace this out here. Voila. So remember, we're going to do 3 screws, and it's a great idea to lay that out with the top upside down like this, because we can see the lines. There'll be no surprises and no guesswork. So our decision at this stage is to determine exactly where the screws are going to go. And once again, the combination square will help us. The middle screw is easy, because the middle screw is just in the middle. And if you remember, 9 inches wide, well, it's a little bit less than 9. So we get 4.5, and then a little bit less than 4.5, and lock it. Very close to being centered there. Okay, now, what do you think? What will we go? Well, I think 1 inch is a little too close to the edge. 2 inches is probably too far from the edge. 1.5 inches might be nice. It's the same dimension as the thickness of the top, so I think that's going to look just fine. Well, let's adjust our combination square to 1.5 inches. And then we just go all around. You see how useful this thing is? Oops, came undone. Very useful for marking. The only thing we have to determine right now is how far from the ends of the boards we're going to drill. So we want to be in the middle of the legs. So that would be, it's 1.5 inches. So we're going to go about 1 inch or 3/4 of an inch or so. And actually, you know what I'm going to do? You see how I don't know if you can tell, Nick, you see how this is curved a bit? That's because of the cupping in the legs. But if you think about it, all I really want is to see a nice straight line of screws on the top. It doesn't really matter if the screws deviate a little bit from center in the edge of the legs. What matters more is how this looks on that side. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take this measurement here, referenced as it is from the edge of the board, and I'm just going to apply it across the board. So then we have a nice straight line of screws. It should work out just the same. Should work out just the same on this side. Actually, that's a little off center from that. And that's a better one there. That one. Great. This is the smaller of the drill bits, the one that does the root diameter of the screw. So it's not big enough for this application. So we put the bigger one in. The one that's just a smidge over 1/4 of an inch, which is the diameter of the screws. And just to make sure that our drill bit doesn't kind of dance around and start going down in the wrong place, I'm going to make a little dimpled mark. Now for some drilling. Can you see? I'm lining up my eye with the drill bit here. I'm lining it up so I can see whether I'm square in this direction, and I'm also taking a look from the side to make sure I'm square in this direction. It's not critical that it be absolutely right, but I do have to be conscious about it because it's very easy to drill at quite an angle if you're not paying attention. Okay, next step is to repeat that procedure that you saw before where we put in some screws and tap them down in order to mark the top of the legs. But there's a bit of a detail here that I need to alert you to. I have the 6 structural screws in place, and I'm going to give them a tap here with this. But something you have to understand. It's very important that the top not move in relation to the legs until I've marked all 6 screws. If I mark a couple of them and then the top shifts and then I mark the rest of them, well, they're not going to be aligned with each other relative to the holes that I'm going to drill. So it's very important that I keep this solid, not let it move. I don't have to really hit this hard. That should do it. Okay, there we have our marks. Now, I have made a mistake. And it's the kind of mistakes that nobody ever completely avoids making, no matter how much experience they have. So this is another chance for a teaching tangent. You will make mistakes. You will make big mistakes at first. And as time goes on and as you put more effort and time into it, your mistakes will be smaller and less important. But you will never completely avoid making mistakes because you can't always see the end from the beginning. And the mistake I made was over here. Remember, I told you that this is a new design. I've designed this little footstool for this course. And my arbitrary decision about where that screw goes put this screw too high. Because what happens is this screw here is going to go down far enough and it's going to hit this. So it's not going to be able to go down all the way. What can I do about that? Well, this is a valuable teaching moment for you because this is the kind of thing you're going to run into all the time. You need to be flexible and you need to say, okay, how can I solve this problem in the simplest way possible? Now, I guess I could take this out and move it down, but now I have a big ugly hole here. We can't have that. I could make new legs, but that would be a real drawback. That would set us back a lot since we're making good progress here. What does that leave me with? Well, what I'm going to do in this case, and I'm going to be happy with this, is I'm just going to trim off a little bit of the central screw. I will just shorten it a little bit so that there is enough room. But for now, I'm not going to worry about that. Now I'm just going to drill the holes like you saw me do before. I'm going to take out the bigger twist bit, and I'm going to put in a smaller one here. Actually, I want to make it a little deeper than that. Yeah. See how that drill bit's not going down all the way? I'm hitting the metal. I'm hitting the metal, but that's okay. We'll fix that. Notice how this hole is a little closer to that face than, say, this one. And that's because, as I said before, the board is cupped. What matters is that they're all in the same line with each other. That's the thing that really matters. Hit that screw again. Actually, I kind of skirted it a bit. Yeah, I'm past it on that side. So the bit must have just grazed one side of the shank of the screw. So I may not need to trim that screw any shorter. So we're ready for assembly, but we're actually ready for me to show you how I'm going to solve another problem. This is sort of the kind of problem you're going to run into with all sorts of projects. So, and it has to do with that gap because the top is cupped. How would I deal with that? Well, there's different ways I can deal with it. One way I could deal with it is to use a hand plane and plane a little bit off here and here, but not in the center, so that I basically make the bottom of this board flat, even though the top is still curved. I could do that. I would have to reduce the thickness of the top by, maybe that much, which is a fair amount. I don't think I want to make it look any thinner. Another option, I guess, is I could, and this would be kind of challenging, I could reduce the length of the legs here at the top, so basically make them a little bit curved to match the curve of the cupped board. That's an option too, but tricky and machine dependent. What I am going to do is I'm going to shorten this screw so that I can drive it. And these screws are powerful enough that they may be able to suck the top down flat to get rid of that cup shape. It's possible, but I'm not sure. And the thing is, if I try and the screw can't do it, it means the screw is chewing up the wood that the threads were biting into, and that screw's not going to grab anymore at all. So I'm going to hedge my bets a bit, and I'm going to use a clamp. I'm going to use a clamp to try to pull this down flat, to get it flat before I drive the screw. And I think those two things together will work for me. Now let's just do a little dry run. That's another thing about woodworking. You always have to test. Just because you have an idea that you think is going to work doesn't mean it actually will. Let's see if we're good. So, can you see the gap there? Oh, that's tight there. Still a little bit of a gap there. Let me try this again on the other side. Well, pretty good. I think I can do better with a stronger clamp. But before I try to grab that stronger clamp, I just want to point out clamps are a big part of woodworking. Irwin Quick Grip. This is a unique style of clamp. I would say it delivers moderate clamping pressure, but it's in a very convenient package because you can push this trigger and you can slide for any size you want. And then when you get it to the size you want, then this squeeze handle takes over and you can squeeze it and it draws in, as I said, a moderate amount of pressure. But for this job, I think we want a large amount of pressure. So I'm going to go get a more powerful clamp, and I'm going to shorten a screw, and then we're going to give this a try. So as you can see, I've shortened the screw on my grinder. You could have just used a shorter screw too, slightly shorter screw. I didn't happen to have one of this kind that was just a little bit shorter, so I ground it off. Grinding machines aren't really a typical part of woodworking, but it is nice to be able to turn to them from time to time. Now, the more powerful clamp. We're going to do this side first, and take a look at how this pulls down. Let's just watch the gap here. Now that's not acceptable. That's too much of a gap. So did it get smaller? It sure did. I think that's quite acceptable now. And we're flush on both sides, so let's drive that shorter screw in first, and then we will drive the other ones. And I'll take the clamp off. Everything should just stay this way, and then we'll flip things over and do the other end. And now it's starting to get tight. I'm hoping that it pulls it down even more, but let's take a look. Even if it doesn't, that's okay. I don't think it's pulled it down anymore, but it's plenty tight. And now we will do the other ones. Flip things over and then tighten up the other side. Well, that's pulled down pretty good. I think I might be able to get a bit more. Maybe if I had another clamp of the same kind on this side. So I'm going to go my clamp rack and get that. The thing about woodworking is you're going to need a lot of clamps. Just a few at first are helpful, but keep building your clamp collection. There's a saying amongst woodworkers, you never really have enough clamps. I've got a lot of clamps. I don't usually run out of clamps for bigger projects, but sometimes I do. So you kind of have to get used to that. Get ready to buy some clamps if you're going to stay into woodworking. Yeah, we've gained a bit more with that, so we're in good shape. I'm going to tighten up the screws. One thing about screws in woodworking is that you have to develop a feel for how to tighten them. It's very possible to over-tighten screws and to have them strip out in the hole. There's only so much pulling that the threads can do on the wood fibers before it starts to slip. And the way you know that is as you tighten up the screw, if it stops getting progressively tighter as the head comes down on the wood, if it stops getting progressively tighter as you continue to tighten it, you know you've reached the limit of what that screw can do in that hole. So you don't want to tighten it anymore. Now with a wrench like this and the leverage that it affords me, I could easily strip out these screws. I could tighten them too tight, the threads would lose their grip on the wood fibers, and then we would have a significantly weaker joint. It would still be stronger than nails, but so now's the time when the feel comes in. Okay, it's not getting any tighter, so I'm not going to tighten anymore, but it's as tight as I want it to be. It's flush, so I'll do the other ones, and then we'll take a look at what we've got. Okay, there we have a functional footstool. And it's even actually pretty stable. Let's see what it feels like on the floor. A bit of a wobble there. Now that could be because of the floor, or it could be because of the stool. So you see, these two sides are high, and the stool is pivoting on these two corners. If it's the stool, it should be the same when I flip it around. If it's the floor, it'll be opposite. So let's see. Still the same. So in the next video, I'm going to show you how to fix that so that your stool is nice and stable.